Okay, so I will start. So today we are discussing whether Sunni hadiths are historically reliable or not. What this means is, are these hadiths telling true events, and can we prove or disprove that they are? Now, before I get started, I will mention on my first argument, I'll mention 2 points in this regard. Firstly, regarding the burden of proof. Many Orientalists and people who are not Sunnis or Salafis, they want to pretend that the burden of proof is entirely on the Sunnis in this regard. I don't think it is. If we are claiming that something is evidence for reliability of hadith or that hadiths are preserved and historically accurate, we have to give some evidence for that. But the same way, if someone is claiming that Sunni hadiths are not preserved or they are not historically reliable, they have to give evidence for that as well. Both are claims and both require evidence. Secondly, if at some point in the debate my interlocutor brings up just a personal opinion or just something that the Orientalist says in some regard, I won't take that as evidence, and I'll give a very simple reason for this. When we look at biblical scholars such as Bar Durman, Dale Allison, and etc., they will constantly and repeatedly defend their claims against Christians who are motivated to challenge them. So they have some credibility, whether you agree with their arguments or not. Orientalists, on the other hand, will never do this. That's why they don't have credibility. These are just two prerequisite points I wanted to make before the debate. Now I'll get on to my first argument for historical reliability of Sunni Hadith. This is a simple argument. This is based on stylometry. This is a method of linguistic analysis using computers and statistical data. Here is the simple argument. There are numerous stylometric studies done on the sayings of Prophet Muhammad (SAW) in Sahih Bukhari. Uh, what these studies show, what these show, among other things, is that the words of Prophet Muhammad (SAW) in Sahih Bukhari have one author. Now, why is this evidence for historical reliability of hadith, or at least the hadiths that were tested? There's a very simple reason for this. If the Muslims in the various regions where the Muslims are present, they were making up hadiths, these hadiths would not be have one author. If these hadiths were coming from multiple sources, these hadiths would not have one author. The only way these can have one author is if the narrators are honest and the narrations are going back to one person. The only common person in all those chains of transmissions is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hence, the Sunni hadiths go back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is my first argument. Now, I think Ilyas is his name. He can respond, and then we'll move the discussion forward.
Yeah, so for the stylometric analysis, well, first of all, you need to show that stylometric analysis itself as a technique is even precise enough to recognize various different authors who are producing content in the same style to even distinguish between them as multiple authors. What is your argument for that?
Stylometry as a linguistic analysis is used again and again. Like, this is something that's accepted, it's widely used. There are dozens and dozens of academic papers for this. I'll give something more specific in this regard. We can actually prove that stylometry works on distinguishing Arabic texts. I have given a reference for this in the presentation I've mentioned, and I found total 9 studies done on various long Arabic texts. Some of these are ancient texts, and stylometry can detect their authors. For instance, there was a study done on 10 ancient Arabic books or documents. They have to be long documents. Stylometry won't work if you just have a very short sample size. We have about 9 studies. I found in my research 9 studies that were done on Arabic text, and stylometry was successful at detecting their authors. Like, for instance, there were 9 books, and the texts were, as far as I know, jumbled up, and stylometry was able to accurately distinguish the authors from each other. So we know stylometry can work for linguistic analysis. There are 9 studies like this. I have published a book on hadith reliability. I reference 5 there, but if you want, I can dig up 4 later as well. There are 4 more for this as well. So we have 9 studies in this regard. You can respond.
Yeah, no, the basic question is what is your proof that stylometry is a reliable method for distinguishing between hadith authorship? What is the argument for that, right? Because in hadith authorship, there are a lot of particular formulas that are used multiple times, right? and there are textual blocks that repeat in the same pattern. So obviously, when there are linguistic features that we know for a fact exist amongst all the corpus, it's not hard for the result or the output to be to show that they have a certain consistency, right? I mean, there are studies on this as well, that various authors who write in a similar style, they show very consistent results, and this has been applied to Greek poetry as well, for example. So stylometric analysis does not give you such precision, especially when there is a repetition, especially when there are certain linguistic formulas that are used all over the domain. So, what exact study are you talking about in which stylometric analysis was conclusively applied to show that it has single authorship, right? And the main problem, just let me finish. And the main problem is that you have to analyze the corpus based on the cumulative evidence. Stylometry is a very weak argumentation, especially when you have other sources which can, for example, Isnad Matan analysis, which can show you that there is borrowing, that there are forgeries in the chain, or there are particular chains that are constructed. So obviously, when you are doing critical history, you take into account all criteria. You don't take into account one argument and make arguments based off it. You have to take all the evidence into account. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, firstly, stylometry is not a weak argument, it's actually a very powerful argument, and it's used again and again for linguistic analysis, and it's statistical, it's something objective, it's not based on personal opinions and feelings, which is what basically most of Orientalist arguments and even the Snatka Matan analysis is mostly based on, firstly. Secondly, you said that what was I specifically using to prove that stylometry can be used for hadith. Stylometry is a method of linguistic analysis. Hadiths are texts in Arabic language. If stylometry can shown to be consistently working on Arabic text, why wouldn't it be used on hadiths? Like you can pretend that says there's some this doesn't prove or there's a magical burden of proof in this regard, but unless you give justification for that, I will just reject your claim. Secondly, you said they were the hadiths were formulaic and there were formulas, etc. in the hadiths or ways of speaking. Here's a contention in this regard that you seem to be alluding to, and if I'm wrong on this, you can correct me later. There is a common contention made against this argument that that the hadiths also contain isnad, words of the companion, and all the other stuff, right? So you can say that how can this possibly be of one author? Here is the problem with this contention. I have spoken with the author of the stylometric studies in detail in this regard, and he told me, and I can give you his email later if you want. He told me that when he did the stylometric analysis, he only took the words of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He removed the isnad, he removed the sayings of companions in this regard, so this claim doesn't work. Secondly, you mentioned about stylometry applying or not applying to Greek text. Like, can you give some references in this regard? Because I can give references of stylometry successfully applying to works of William Shakespeare and other poets and playwrights like this. Like this stuff is even on Wikipedia. So this stuff was used for authorship verification in those cases. So can you give some references of the Greek uh, text that you were mentioning? Because if you're just going with some vague formulation in this regard or vague words, I won't take them seriously because everything I said, I gave references for that and it's in pretty simple and clear cut terms. Now you can respond to this argument, but one last thing. You said we have to look at other stuff. You can bring up other stuff later as arguments, such as your claim from Isnad ka Matan analysis or some other thing. But that wouldn't refute the stylometry argument. That would be other arguments against hadith, right? That would be a discussion of whether hadiths are reliable or not. But in terms of stylometric argument, that does absolutely nothing. You can respond.
Yeah, so what is this particular study that you're talking about? First of all, we'd have to go there. So, which study in particular are you citing, which has done stylometric analysis of hadith?
Muhammad.
Would you like me to read the references?
No, just tell me the name of the reference. What's the name of the paper or book?
Okay, uh, I'll tell you the references of the stylometric study that shows that analyzes the statements of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I'll tell you the name of one of the studies that does on Arabic text in general. So the stylometric study that analyzes the words of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's called Author Discrimination Between Holy Quran and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam Statement. This was published in 2012, and the author is Halim Sayyid. There are other studies like this as well, and I'll give more references like this if you want. Just give me one
Yeah,
moment.
so
Let me just give one more references. Elias, just let me give one more reference. Here the
Go ahead.
now
Go
I'm
ahead. Go ahead.
mentioning Now I'm mentioning a study which analyzed 10 different Arabic texts. Right? Here's the name of the study. Authorship, attribution of ancient texts written by 10 Arabic travelers using character n-grams. The name of the authors are Siham Uwamur. I think I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, and Halim Sayyid. This was published in 2013. You can respond.
Ilyas.
yes, so the paper about author discrimination. What is it exactly is it talking about? What is the exact conclusion? Because author discrimination has to do with the textual blocks just being distinct.
Those studies show two things. Basically, it was done on Quran and Hadith, and it was a comparison. Those studies to show two things. Quran has one author, Hadith have one author. They are not the same author. The reason I'm using that study here is to use a simple point from that study, that the Hadith or words of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Sahih Bukhari have one author. That is what I'm using them for.
How does it prove that hadith has one author?
Well, it does a variety of linguistic analysis and statistical data that are done in numerous other cases as well, that are used in stylometry in journal. It's a matter of linguistic analysis that commonly used. It applies that linguistic analysis to hadith to show that hadith have one author, or at least the words of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Sahih Bukhari have one author.
Can you read a passage from the paper that says this?
Sure, give me a moment. I'll just read
Go ahead.
one of the references.
No, I'm particularly asking about the author discrimination
Sure.
paper.
Sure. I am reading from the 2012 study. I mentioned author discrimination between Holy Quran and Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam statement. Here is the what I'm reading from that. Results of all experiments have led to two main conclusions. Firstly, the two investigated books should have different authors. Secondly, all segments that are extracted from a unique book appear to have a certain stylistic similarity. Consequently, we can conclude, according to the investigation, that the Quran was not written by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that it belongs to a unique author too. Like, this is a short snippet. I can read other references if you like as well.
Yeah, so I don't really, what's the proof that hadith itself originates from a single author? Because what it is saying here, even if we take it at face value, even though it is not a highly reproduced, obviously this study would have to be reproduced as well. What it seems to be saying is that Quran is one unique textual block and hadith is another textual block. How does that prove that hadith is a single author?
It is saying hadith is a unique textual block as well. That's the first point. Secondly,
Yeah, in
so it is
comparison to
saying that
Quran.
hadith have one author.
Yeah, no.
No, it is saying hadith have one author.
What's the proof
Like,
for
it is
that?
specifically saying this. You are asking two questions right now. One question is whether this particular study says it is the case or not, and the second question is whether it's actually proven or not. Which one do you want me to answer? Because I can answer both
Well,
if you like.
yeah, first of all, you'd have to show that this particular study says that. I don't really see that in unambiguous terms. But more importantly, you have to show that it is actually the case.
Okay. Firstly, as far as this study is concerned, I think when it's saying that each particular text block or each particular book has a certain stylistic or linguistic similarity, it is saying that they have one author. But you don't just have to take my word for this. I have talked to the author of the study, and he has done numerous studies on this topic, and he's basically saying the same thing. This is the exact conclusion he takes from the study. And if you want, I can read another study of his as well, because I have it right in front of me. So, as far as whether this study says it, whether the hadiths have one author or not, that claim I think has been addressed sufficiently. If you want, I can read even more studies in this regard. Secondly, you said that this study would need to be verified. Here's a simple response to this study. This author did his first study on this topic in 2012, and he has basically been doing them for more than a decade or so. Now, these studies were actually published in an international conference, like it was in Algeria and a few other countries. There was an international conference. I can link it later if you want as well. Actually, I can link it in 5 minutes or so. In that conference, these studies are presented, and this has been happening again and again. So the claim about verification or these haven't been verified, that does not hold water. Now this addresses the claim whether this study is saying that the hadiths have one author or not. Now I'll go to the big meta claim that whether hadiths actually have one author or not. Here is the simple response to this. Stylometry is a method of linguistic analysis that is used again and again in linguistic analysis. We know because of numerous stylometric studies it can work on Arabic text. This method is showing that the sayings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Sahih Bukhari have one author. We have independent reason to think that this
Yeah,
method is reliable.
just a minute. Where is it
Let me
showing
finish
that?
this point, then
Because,
you can
okay, go
respond.
ahead.
So we have multiple independent reasons to think that both the author of these studies saying these have one author, and that stylometry actually shows they have one author. Now you can respond.
Yeah, where is it showing that the hadith has one author? That's all I'm asking for. Where does it say that? And what is the evidence for that? Because what I am seeing here is mere similarity. That this is not an argument for author's profile. This is not a stylometric analysis of author profile. This is a stylometric analysis for content differentiation, right? I don't see the segment on author profiling. Where is it?
Firstly, if there is content differentiation, you can tell they are different authors. If each text has a unique stylistic similarity, then they have one author. Like this is exactly what it is. And to be honest, if you want, I'll reference
Yeah,
a second stylometric study in this regard from the same author. This from 2015, and he mentions this even more explicitly. Would you like me
yeah,
to read
because
from it?
yeah, sure. Well, first of all, let's talk about this one and then we can move on to next one. Because here, all it's talking about is different similarity matrices. And, actually, it doesn't seem to be that high. For H1 and H2, it's merely 32.89%. For H1 and H3, it's 31.43%. For H1 and H4, it's 28.22%. So it's not highly significant. It's not even higher than 50%. So first of all, to conclusively prove a particular author profiling, you would have to take a particular stylometric model, right, and see how it works for established texts where we know that there is a particular established author, i.e., using textual blocks for the same text. And then once its predictions are reliable over that text, only then we can apply it to any other text. So that's basically from a computing standpoint, that's the evidence we would be asking for.
Wait, hold on. Where'd he go? Oh, there he
Is
is.
back.
Okay.
So Muhammad, you would have to show a stylometric analysis that is based on a particular model that has the accuracy of differentiating between authors or predicting authors correctly. And then you have to
Ilyas,
use the exact model.
can you repeat the last 20 seconds
Yes, I
because
can.
I don't know what
I
happened?
can, no problem. What I'm saying is that this study does not seem to talk about author profiling in detail, right? If you want to make an argument based purely on author profiling and the unity of author or single authorship, you need to show a study in which there is a model that independently has been checked for reliability, i.e., it has been fed same different textual blocks from the same text, and it comes up with a high rating for those texts, such that we know for a fact that it can distinguish uh, uh, between texts, and then you should apply stylometric analysis, i.e., different hadith blocks, and then the study would be more reliable. I don't see that happening here. This is merely talking about content similarity and stylistic similarity. Even the stylistic similarity is not high. Like even if you read the similarity matrices, it's H1, H2 bears 32%, right? Which is like not that significant. Like you have Q1 and H1, or for example, Q1 and H1 is confirming 20%. Q2 and H1 are confirming 19%. So you already have, yeah, I don't know why does he keep on leaving. You already have you already have 20% similarity even in different textual blocks for a fact, and there's just an increase of 10% similarity. So that doesn't seem very significant. So for you to make an single authorship argument from stylometry, you would have to provide a citation or a paper that is particularly trained for single authorship or authorship analysis, not just for stylistic analysis.
Okay, I'll respond to this claim. Firstly, with regards to the particular numbers we're mentioning, after I respond, just tell me which specific page from the paper you were reading these from, and then I'll address those claims specifically. As for the second point regarding linguistic analysis and stylistic similarity and differences, this is how authorship determination or discrimination is always done. You are saying that these are independent things, but these are not. This is literally how authorship determination or discrimination is done. These studies are linguistic studies where the author is clearly saying these hadiths have one author. That is the point of testing of stylometry. That's the entire point. Now, you can give the particular page from the paper later, like just after I finish talking about the particular percentages you are getting these from. But these studies have been tested again and again and published in international conferences. If your claim is correct, like, that these are not showing author discrimination, then why didn't someone challenge those in those international conferences on it? I think you're just making claims out of thin air here. There are numerous papers, and most importantly in this regard, I talked to the author myself. He said I'm not misinterpreting his words. These studies literally showing these hadiths have one author, and this is something that's peer reviewed. It's not something he's cooking up in his mother's basement. These are peer-reviewed papers in published international conferences. He's saying the same thing I am, and this paper is clearly saying. In fact, I saw one of those papers where uh, basically they used visual representation to show the differences between Quran and Hadith. And in one section of that graph, for entire Quran, all the Quran texts were present. In another section, all the Hadith texts were present. So there are massive linguistic differences between Quran and Hadith. So even your claim regarding that there is little stylistic difference, that's just plainly false. That's something even many Orientalists will admit. In fact, Joshua Little is an Orientalist scholar who actually tried to respond to this stylometry argument. The more details of my response to him are in my book. But he acknowledged that there are massive linguistic differences between the Quran and Hadith. And this is something he said that has been widely known in academia for centuries. So right now, your claim is not just arguing against me or the author of the studies. You are arguing against what the Orientalists themselves were saying. That's how ridiculous your claim is. Now you can give me the specific pages where you were getting those particular numbers from, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I think first of all, you misrepresented or misunderstood what I said, and maybe it was an effect of you dropping out in the middle. I'm not talking about. I'm not positing that there are no stylistic differences between Quran and Hadith. I mean, that's pretty clear that there are differences between Quran and Hadith, and this paper particularly is about that. What I'm asking you is, you need to prove single authorship for hadith, right? And I don't see the evidence for that. And I told you already what is going to be the evidence for that. It is going to be a model that is trained particularly for detecting single authorship or multiple authorship, right? In this paper, I told you as well, you can go open page 440, and there are particular tables that tell you about similarity matrices, right? And even if you look at similarity matrices, what you see is that all it is showing is that there is a higher percentage of similarity, around 10% on average. There's a higher percentage of similarity between the Hadith text and the Quran text. We already would expect that if we are taking from a different genre. You need to show to me how does this higher value, higher 10% value in a similarity matrix entail single authorship. It doesn't, right? Because just because there is a higher stylistic similarity, it would not entail that the author is the same. It could be an effect of the content. It could be effect of the formulas that are used in the particular content. It could even be the effect of the repetition of the same hadith, right? So all this needs to be taken into account. So for you to make a single authorship stylistic argument for hadith, you need to show me the same analysis based on a single authorship model, a model that detects authorship, right? Do you have a study like that?
Okay, I'll respond to these points. Firstly, where is the claim about average being 10% in this regard? Because to be honest, the most tables I am seeing here, they are about 20 to 30%. Like it's close to 20% or 30% in particular cases. And like that is not particular, those are individual statistics. They are not statistics of overall similarity. So it seems that you are trying to take those statistics and say that there is only 10 to 20% difference between Quran and Hadith, and that claim is blatantly nonsensical. Secondly, I don't see anywhere where it's saying that the average is 10%. Can you point out which line it's saying that average is 10%? You can do that after I talk, but please do tell me where it's saying that the average is 10%. So these numbers are not saying how much exactly, that this is not the overall percentage of how similar or different Quran and Hadith are. That claim is just nonsensical. Secondly, if you're coming up with a specific criteria, unless you bother to justify that criteria, it's worthless. Here's what I'm basing my argument on. There are numerous stylometric studies, not just one or two, that are stylometry is a method that's used for authorship detection again and again. All of these tests of similarity and differences are based on are methods that are commonly used for authorship detection. These are showing that the Quran has a certain unique stylistic similarity that shows Quran as one author, and Hadith have a certain stylistic similarity, unique stylistic similarity that shows all of them have one author. Suppose one author wrote 10 books, and to check whether they are his work or not, or they are coming from one source or not, what would we do? We would look at we would compare the 10 books and see if they have stylistic similarities or not, or differences or not. This is exactly what we would do, and if those books have similarities, unique stylistic similarities, then we would conclude those books are words of one author. That is happening with this study. That is happening with all other studies like this. Now, if you will allow me, let me read a second study from Halim Sayud. This was published in 2015, and he's saying the same thing here even more specifically regarding authorship detection. This study is called a visual analytics based investigation on the authorship of Holy Quran, but it analyzes the Hadith as well. I'll just read the reference. Here's the reference. In this investigation, two visual analytics based clustering approaches have been employed to make a visual authorship clustering of 25 religious text segments. In the first approach, hierarchical clustering, the resulting dendrogram shows two separated sharp clusters, the Quran cluster in the right and the Hadith cluster in the left. We can see that there is no intersection between the different clusters, and that the final linkage is extremely weak since the corresponding distance is very large. The result shows that there are probably two authors, Quran author and the Hadith author, meaning Hadith has one author. In the second approach, fuzzy C-mean clustering, which is an automatic clustering technique, the resulting 3D representation shows two main clusters, a Quran cluster located at the top right area and a Hadith cluster located at the bottom left area of the 3D representation. Although the Quran cluster is more condensed, the two set of text segments have been automatically organized into two sharp clusters with different symbol markers, showing that there are two main authors, the Quran author and the Hadith author, and the two authors are different. The author is saying the same thing I am saying in this regard, and this study, with its visual analytics, is showing that even more explicitly. These are, again, let me repeat this point. These are not one, two things. There are dozens of studies on this topic that are published in international conferences that have been analyzed again and again. And all of these are methods that are commonly used for authorship discrimination and detection. All these are showing that hadiths have one author. So I don't think your claim holds water. You can respond. By the way, just tell me where it says specifically 10%, because that's a specific claim you made, that the average is 10%.
Yeah, yeah, that's in the I was talking about. Let me tell you. On page 440, table 10. I was looking at table 10. So yeah, coming back to this topic, I think I've told you the main problem is this. There seems to be a logical jump from in this claim by the author, and I don't think that is substantiated. You need to provide evidence for that. Um, the we are not discussing, we are not disagreeing over the fact of intertextual analysis, right? We are not disagreeing over separate styles of Quran and Hadith, right? For you to prove single authorship of the Quran, you need to show a stylometric analysis from a model that has predictable power on authorship, right? We are not talking about style differentiation on particular authorship. In both the models that the author of the paper has run, it is based on stylistic differentiation, and then from stylistic differentiation, based on similarity, he's running the claim, which I don't think is substantiated, that the author is one, right? For that, you need to run particularly an intratextual analysis of the corpus and come up with a claim about authorship. And even if you read later stylometric studies, what you see is that authors that are producing content in a similar manner, they tend to overlap a lot, right? Such that distinguishing between them is particularly difficult, right? And there is a later study on this topic as well, which I can cite to you, which studies the analysis of various different authors on this topic. For example, Greek authors and Icelandic authors and English authors. So again, the evidence that you need to bring is something on intratextual analysis of the corpus, and that proves single authorship. So it has to be a model that was tested for single authorship. If you can produce something like that, that would be much more valuable evidence than just providing evidence for stylistic differences.
Okay, I'll respond to this. Firstly, I just read table 10 here. It doesn't say percentage is 10, like the average is 10%. I'm looking at it right here. Most of these numbers are 20 or above 20, some are 19 or 18. It's not showing 10% everywhere. So that claim is just blatantly false. Secondly, with regards to the
No,
criteria
I'm
for
I'm
determining.
talking about 10% difference in 10%, difference of 10%. I'm not talking about the values, the absolute values. I'm talking about the difference, i.e., the difference between Hadith segment 1 and Hadith segment 2 and Quran segment, right? Because you need to have a relative analysis of the data. But anyway, go ahead.
If we look at the difference between hadith segments themselves, then that's 1 or 2%. If you look at the Quran segments themselves, the difference is 1 or 2%. Between Quran segments and between hadith segments, yeah, that can be about 10%, but between the hadith segments themselves and Quran segment themselves, there's just difference of 1 or 2%. So that point is addressed. But more than that, these numbers are not absolute differences of how different Quran and Hadith are. And I think I proved that with the second reference I gave based on visual analytics. Now I'll address the point regarding the criteria you are coming up with. You are saying that we need to have one specific stylometric study that does one method of linguistic analysis that shows that can detect authorship or number of authors or author discrimination, and that can prove the reliability of hadith. There are multiple problems with in general with the criteria you are giving. You are coming up to this table with a particular criteria. I am coming up with a particular criteria. You are saying that my criteria, that we have numerous studies that show hadith have one author that use a different stylometric analysis, is wrong. If you are going to claim and yours is right, if you are going to come up with a with your personal criteria and you're saying my criteria is wrong, that claim will require a lot of justification. So you have to address it afterwards, after I'm done talking. Now, just to address, now even if I take your criteria that we need to have one specific model that has been shown to detect historical reliability or single authorship reliably, and that should work as evidence. All of the numerous tests done in the stylometric analysis are done on authorships, and they are done using authorship to detect one author. In some cases, if there is one author, these studies will show there is one author. If there are multiple authors, these studies will show there are multiple authors. So even if I take your claim seriously, I think your criteria is met, because all of the stylometric tests that are done here, they are showing hadith have one author. Now you are making another fallacy in this regard. You are saying that the authors are proving stylistic similarity and differences, and this isn't proof of authorship. Here is the problem with this claim. All tests of authorship are tests of stylistic similarity and differences. Literally all tests are, whether they are done using stylometry or using taking even two random points. If their styles and the word choice and other stuff are similar, then you would say they have one author. If they are not similar, you would say they have multiple authors. So I don't think I'm making a fallacy here. I think you are fundamentally misrepresenting how authorship analysis is done. Now, here's the relevant point to remember in this regard. There are numerous stylometric studies that can test for one authorship. By the way, these tests used in these studies, they can test for one author. If they show there is one author, if the book has one author, they will show that the studies will show one author. If the book has two authors, the study will show there are two authors. So I don't think your claim holds any water, because these tests that can work reliably, and they do work again and again, they are showing there is one author. Now I'll address another contention of yours. You were saying that these tests basically can be due to people fabricating hadith in a similar style. You didn't use these words specifically, but you were saying that these studies, stylometric studies, can show there to be one author of the hadith, even if multiple people are making these hadiths up. This claim also does not work, and there is a very simple reason for this. Stylometric studies have been done on the comparison between what Sunnis call fabricated hadith and what Sunnis call authentic hadith. There are two studies done on this that show that stylometry can distinguish between fabricated and authentic hadith. One study showed the number is 78%. It was an earlier study. A later study done in 2021 or 2022 showed that stylometry can distinguish between authentic and fabricated hadith up to 92%. Now, here's a simple thing everyone listening to this study should keep in mind. If these hadiths were all fabricated, if the Sahih and fabricated hadiths are all made up by the Muslims, as the Orientalists claim, and as I think you are claiming here, or at least you're claiming most of them are made up, why is the stylometric analysis of these both hadiths so different? If this can be due to fabrication, if everyone is just making hadith in a similar style, or they are just making things up, or the stylometric similarity of Sahih hadith is because of them being in a similar linguistic style, then why aren't they similar with fabricated hadith? On your theory, these should be extremely similar, but that's not the case. In fact, in my correspondence with Joshua Little, we were discussing this on Twitter messages. He said stylometry is not evidence for hadith reliability because stylometry cannot distinguish between authentic and fabricated hadith. Well, 10 seconds later, I showed him a study that shows that stylometry can distinguish between authentic and fabricated hadith. So I think this fact is enough to refute most of your claims and most of the contentions to this argument. You can respond.
No, it doesn't answer me at all, because I'm asking you a very rational criteria, which any reasonable person would agree with. You have to show me, if you're making an argument on single authorship, you have to show me the output should be from a model that has been tested for single authorship. It cannot be for a model that is tested for stylistic variation. That's as simple as that. So do you have a study that tests single authorship for hadith based on a model that was tested for single authorship.
Here is the problem with your claim. All of the studies that I am using, all of the criteria they are using, all of the models they are using, all of them have been tested for single authorship. They literally are. If you apply a method, if you apply them on one book, they will show one author. If you apply them on multiple book, they show multiple authors.
Yeah,
This is
that's
literally
just a
done again
claim.
and
Yeah,
again.
I'm sorry. That's just a claim. Please show me a citation. Please show me a peer-reviewed publication that uses a model. A peer-reviewed publication that's primary aim is to test for single authorship or not, right? On all these studies that you have shown, there seems to be a logical jump from stylistic variation between two different corpuses to there being a single author. We are not talking. So, see, that's the problem. First you were talking about, and the author of the paper is talking about inter-cluster analysis, and from there you jump to an intra-cluster analysis. That's not justifiable unless your model was also trained on intra-cluster analysis as well. And if that is the case, you need to show me a citation where an intra-cluster model is tested that is particularly tested for single authorship, and then it comes up with the conclusion that there is a single authorship here. And on just on prima facie reading, the reason it fails is because even according to the traditionalist scholars, and everybody agrees with this, the transmission of ahadith was bil ma'na. The riwayat were riwayat bil ma'na, and this is very easy. If you collate all the asanid, you will clearly see that the riwayat are riwayat bil ma'na. They are not riwayat bil lafz, right? There are particular variations for every single hadith that you collate. There are going to be variations in order. There are going to be variations in verb format. There is going to be variations in all those things based on the particular recension that you're looking at. So just on the very fundamental reading, the data would not make sense unless you're talking about a very general abstract notion of thematic analysis, which is different from stylometric analysis. Because we know for a fact that the style of the particular hadith is affected by the particular recension, and nobody questions this. Even the traditionalists accept that the ahadith were ahadith bil ma'na, the riwayat bil ma'na, they were not riwayat bil lafz, unless it's a very short textual block or something. That's a separate case.
Okay, I'll address the multiple points. Firstly, with regards to the criteria you're claiming that you're saying it's rational for some reason. I don't think it is. You are saying, and this is why I don't think it's rational. You are saying that all these authorship analysis that work again and again uh, for numerous tests that can show one author, that can be shown to show one author, that have been shown to show multiple authors. If there are multiple authors, they don't work. We need some new undefined criteria that just
No,
test
that's
single
not.
authorship.
Sorry,
But
that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. You're
okay,
misunderstanding me. That's not what I said.
okay, just
What I
repeat the
said is,
point about Ilyas.
yeah,
Just repeat the point about criteria, and I'll respond to it
yeah.
specifically.
What I'm saying is, all these you are talking, you're mixing things up. That's the problem. You are talking about uh, stuff. You're talking about models that are trained for intertextual analysis. Sorry, intratextual analysis, i.e. single authorship analysis. Great. If those models are there, great, absolutely awesome. Right? And I know those models are there. The thing is, I'm asking for a citation for a publication that applies one of those particular models to hadith. Right? The citations that you are bringing me are not about intratextual analysis. They are about intertextual analysis.
Can
Right?
I
So
ask you a
I'm
question,
asking you
Ilyas?
exactly that. Yeah,
Before
go
we
ahead.
move forward, can I ask you a question? What is the difference, right, between a stylometric study that just particularly detects one author or a stylometric study that checks how many authors are there? Because to be honest, it seems like what you are saying, it seems like circular reasoning, that it has to assume first there is one author instead of checking how many authors a
No,
particular
no,
text
no, no.
actually
Sorry,
has.
that's not what I'm asking either. What I'm saying
What
is,
are you asking?
right now, yes, right now, all the citations, all the publications that you're bringing, they are primarily aimed at analyzing stylistic differences between Quran and Hadith. That is called intercluster analysis. There is no problem with that. I agree. Everybody in academia agrees that there are stylistic differences between Quran and Hadith. Nobody disagrees with this. I'm asking you for a study that is particularly on intra-cluster analysis, i.e., that takes the cluster of Hadith and does a stylometric analysis on it. Just like there are stylometric studies, intra-cluster stylometric studies on Quran, right? You would be aware of this. Sadeghi has a long paper on stylometric study on Quran as an individual unit, as an individual corpus, right? So similarly, I'm asking you for a study where the primary aim is to do an intra-cluster analysis on the Hadith. What I'm saying is that he needs to bring evidence for something, or he needs to bring an evidence or a citation that is studying Hadith as a corpus individually, not Hadith as a corpus in comparison to Quran as a corpus. Do you understand? Because these are two distinct models.
I think I understood what you said. Now I'll respond to this point. Obviously, I'm forgetting some of the things that Ilyas said earlier, such as, for instance, the Sunni scholars saying that hadiths are transmitted bil mana. I'll address them later. Right? Firstly, I'll just address the point about stylometric studies. Here is what Ilyas is saying. Ilyas is saying that there are stylometric studies that are done just on the Quran. For instance, he mentioned Sadeghi study, which is just done on the Quran. Ilyas is saying that these studies are comparison between Quran and Hadith, that they are not just on the Hadith. This is his problem with my argument. Here is a simple response to his claim. So what if these studies are analyzing both Quran and Hadith? That doesn't change anything. They are also testing the authorship, how many authors are there in Quran and Hadith. This is literally what all of these studies are testing. And all of those studies, peer-reviewed studies, are showing them this fact again and again, that Quran and Hadith have one author. Ilyas is saying that there needs to be one specific study on Hadith that shows Hadith have one author. But why can't we take the studies done on Quran and Hadith, which are still proven, which are using the same statistical model, that would have showed Hadith that would have showed one authorship, if there is one authorship, and we should ignore that. Here is the problem with this claim. Suppose the exact same study that was done on Quran and Hadith was done entirely on one book. That study in that case would still have showed one author. Literally, any of the stylometric studies done on Quran and Hadith, if they were done on one particular book alone, they would have showed one author. This is just a fact. This is how stylometric analysis is done. And if there are two authors, they would show two authors. If there are three authors, they would show three authors. This is how peer-reviewed research into stylometry is literally done. He's saying because there is no study on just Hadith, therefore this argument does not work. Here is my problem with this claim. These studies are testing the number of authors. If suppose Quran and Hadith are both made up by Prophet Muhammad Na'uzubillah, and both were exactly his words, these studies would have shown one author. If they were made up by two or three people, these studies would have shown two or three authors. So his claim doesn't hold water. Just to explain it more clearly, and so everyone can understand, because everyone here has not done research into stylometry, so they might have a bit of problem with this issue. Here is Ilyas's argument one last time. I'm just repeating it. He's saying there are independent stylometric studies that are just done on the Quran. They show Quran have one author. An example of this is Sadeghi studies. He's saying there are no such studies on the Hadith. He's saying that all the studies I am bringing are done an analysis of Quran and Hadith, and that they are just comparing stylistic similarities and differences. This is half right claim and a half false claim. I'll explain why. All of the studies I am bringing, they are done on Quran and Hadith. This part is true, but here's the part that's false. He's saying that these studies are just testing similarities and they are not testing authorship. This claim is false. These are literally testing authorship. If the Quran and Hadith were na'udzubillah both made up by the same person, they would have showed one author. If they were made up by 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, and they were same, they would have showed one author, or 4 or 5 authors. My mistake. These studies are testing authorship verification. They are testing number of authors. And these studies are showing again and again in peer-reviewed, published international conferences the simple fact that the hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ have one author in Sahih Bukhari. This is a fact that he is denying, but the problem with this claim is that this fact, the hadith having one author, is published in peer-reviewed papers and international conferences, and it has been tested again and again. This is why his claim is false. Now, Ilyas can respond to this. Then I want to move on to the claim that hadiths were transmitted bil mana only.
Yeah, I think I have said it multiple times. You're still not answering my question. I've explained it to you. What your studies are doing, they are clustering different corpuses, right? And they are clustering them in different manners based on their stylistic variation. We don't disagree with that. The thing is, you need to run on a model an intra-cluster analysis that would show that this cluster itself is generated through one source, right? And for that to happen, you need to run an intra-cluster analysis. That's the main point. You need to show a study which was based on a model that was particularly trained for intra-cluster analysis and recognition, right? This right now, what you're talking about is, if you have two broadly distinct clusters in both the studies that you have cited, that's what is happening. There is a lot of variability within the cluster as well. You can see it, or even if you open the second paper that you cited, there's a lot of variability within the hadith cluster, right? And the author recognizes this as well. So yeah, unique in their style, that's absolutely fine. Comparatively, they are unique. That is not, even if the author claims, right? We are not concerned with the author's claim. We need evidence. Even if the author claims, because these are two unique styles, that implies unique authorship. Well, yeah, it does imply unique authorship. It doesn't imply single authorship. For single authorship to happen, you need to run it on a model that tests for single authorship, right? And I already cited, 1 minute, let me finish. And I already cited you multiple examples where it becomes pretty hard to detect for single authorship. For example, if you read in Journal of Culture Analysis, author similarity across time in ancient Greek corpus, published July 8, 2020. This paper shows, and this is a large model that does stylometry, and it shows it's actually very hard to distinguish between content of the similar genre and similar time, right? So, and why? Because there's a particular stylistic features, and there are particular generic features that instantiate in all particular texts of a particular time, right? So this is the problem that we are facing, and you keep on repeating the very same claim, but you're not providing a study that tests particularly for single authorship of hadith. Just like there are other studies, I told you Sadri, and there are other study stylometric analysis for Quranic authorship. Why can't you present the same study for hadith authorship? And don't repeat the same thing. Don't repeat the same thing. There's a very specific difference between intra-cluster analysis. I have already explained to you. There's a very specific difference between intra-cluster analysis and inter-cluster analysis. When you have variability within the cluster, you cannot just claim that this is single authorship. You have to show that this intra-cluster variability is not a result of multiple authors, right? And for that, you need a sophisticated single authorship model that can detect for that, right? So this is very simple. This should not be very complicated to you.
Okay, firstly, I think it is pretty simple. It's not complicated at all for someone who just understand a little bit of this terms we are having, that you are being refuted for very simple reasons. And now I'll explain why. Here's what intercluster analysis means according to Ilyas and what intra-cluster analysis means. Intra-cluster analysis means just an analysis done on the hadith themselves or just an analysis done on the Quran themselves. Inter-cluster analysis would mean an analysis done on both Quran and hadith. Ilyas is saying there is no intra-cluster analysis taking place in these studies. This claim is false. When the author states that the similarity of the cluster of the Quran and the
That's
similarity
not
of
what I said. That's not what I said. No, you
this
shouldn't
is literally what
misinterpret
you
what I
said,
said. That's not what I
Ilyas.
said.
Let
I never
look,
claimed this.
Ilyas.
That's not what I said.
I
Muhammad,
didn't interrupt you the entire time you were speaking.
Okay, Muhammad, just to make sure that you're not taking Ilyas out of context here. Ilyas, can you just one more time just repeat the question that
Look,
you want
Nadeem,
Muhammad to answer?
just let him mention the specific point I'm wrong on. Then we move
Yeah,
on because I let him
because
speak for way too long.
brother Muhammad.
I didn't say there is no intra-cluster analysis. What I am saying is that there is variability within the cluster itself. There's large variability within the cluster, even if you look at the citation that you have cited yourself. And for you to prove that there is single authorship, you need to show us a strong intra-cluster analysis on a particular model that has been tested for single authorship, i.e. when you give it a single text, it shows there's a single text, and when you give it different text, it shows you that it's a different text. That's what you need to do for you to prove single authorship. Go ahead.
Can I respond now
Did you
without
understand the question
interruption?
now, Muhammad?
I understood it before as well. He didn't say anything new. Just let me speak without interruption because I let Ilyas speak a long time without interruption. So that only seems fair. Firstly, let me just point out one thing. Early on, Ilyas was saying there was no intra-cluster analysis. Now, at least he's admitting there is intra-cluster analysis, that there is some intra-cluster analysis done. So, his claim that I need to give independent studies where the cluster of hadith themselves is just analyzed, it's worthless because that is happening in all of these studies. All of these studies are literally analyzing the cluster of hadith themselves. So his claim fails in this regard. Here's what he's saying is regard to this specifically, and I'll move on to other stuff because his other points are important as well. He's saying that instead of hadith cluster being analyzed in these studies, there should be separate studies like they are on the Quran where the hadith cluster is analyzed itself. And that claim is baseless. That's just a subjective value judgment. That's why it is worthless. Now I'll move on to his claims regarding hadith clusters, right? He's saying there is massive variability or differences between the hadith section themselves. That shows that hadith cannot be due to one author, or that at least can be evidence hadiths are not of one author. This claim is false because even if you look at the statistical data in the first study he gave here, the difference between hadith segments themselves were 1 or 2%. I can read those tables again and anyone can read those tables. It's on the page 440, I think. Difference between hadith segments themselves is 1 or 2%. Between hadith and Quran is 10%. And the Quran segments themselves have a difference of 1 or 2% as well. So there is very little stylistic difference between hadith segments. In the second study I gave regarding the clustering, that cluster of hadith and Quran on visual analytics, all the Quran sections were grouped together very far from the hadith, and all the hadith sections were grouped together very far from the Quran. So his claim regarding there being massive differences based on hadith, based on the stylometric data, is false. It's plainly and explicitly refuted by the text itself. Secondly, he said that the words or opinions of the author don't matter, right? And here's the problem with this claim. If the author was saying something that he did not publish in the peer-reviewed paper, right? I agree. In that case, it won't matter. But the authorship, the author of the study, the claim is making regarding the authorship of Quran and Hadith, the fact that these have one author, is published in the peer-reviewed paper in the international conferences. These claims are not just random claims made outside of peer-reviewed text. These claims are made in the peer-reviewed literature itself. This is what the author is saying. This is how stylometric analysis is always done. This is why the claim Ilyas is making is worthless. Literally, this is present. The stuff regarding single authorship is present in explicit words in the mainstream peer-reviewed paper. You cannot dismiss this out of hand because this stuff is mentioned explicitly in the peer-reviewed paper. So his claim regarding Quran and Hadith like not being analyzed, it's simply false, because he said that Hadiths are not independently analyzed. They are in the stylometric studies. They are independently analyzed, and the similarity and differences between various Hadiths are analyzed. Now, this is the first point. Second point, he said that the similarity of Hadith could be due to multiple other reasons, and he mentioned a Greek study on Greek poetry showing that this is the case, that this could be possible. Now, just do a simple comparison on your mind. What is more relevant to the application of stylometry to Hadith? A stylometric study on similarities between between Sahih and fabricated Hadith, or a stylometric study on Greek text? Anyone in the right mind will agree the stylometric study on Sahih and fabricated Hadith is more relevant to this topic. So he hasn't addressed that part yet once. Now, if he's bringing the Greek study to show that stylometry cannot always work, right? Here's the problem with that. He brought one Greek study to show stylometry cannot work. I can bring nine stylometric studies done on Arabic text right now that show that stylometry works. 9 positive, 1 negative. What will you take? Like, this is not rocket science. This is actually very simple. Now I'll address the last part Ilyas said. That was regarding the hadith being transmitted regarding bil mana only or mainly. This claim is false. Here is a simple fact, and you don't need to take my word on this. You can look at Mustafa Al-Azami's book. I think it's the 130-page book. One of his books is Studies in Hadith, Early Hadith Literature. I don't think it's that one, it's the other one. So Studies in Methodology and Literature. In it, he says there are 4 methods of transmission. One of them was reliable mana, and another was reliable lafz, like word for word transmission. Here is the thing that everyone watching this debate or analyzing this argument needs to remember. Both types of transmissions were used by Muslims. We don't know how much of the hadiths were transmitted verbatim, how many of the hadiths were transmitted bil mana. What we can tell is that stylometric studies done on the hadiths in Sahih Bukhari are showing that these particular hadiths were transmitted word for word, verbatim. So I think that addresses his claim. Now, Ilyas can address one more point on this, on the stylometry argument, and I would hope that he addresses the part between stylometric differences between authentic and fabricated hadiths, because that study meets the criteria Orientalists set for themselves. After he addresses it, I want to move on to 1 or 2 other arguments for hadith reliability, or maybe one of his arguments, and then I'll have to go.
I mean, we haven't even started talking about this other study. We were just talking about the first 2 studies that you have cited, and we can move on to the next one. But we are not going to move on to the next one until you concede to this point that you have not provided us an intra-cluster analysis. It's as simple as that. Like, everybody is listening. That's not going to change the fact. Just because Quran and Hadith have 2 different styles, that doesn't mean that one cluster is produced by one source. It doesn't mean that, right? Especially when the variability within the hadith cluster is higher. Even the citations that you are giving, even in those citations, the variability within the hadith structure, the hadith cluster is higher, right? You need to provide us a model that particularly tests for single authorship, a model that was trained to test for single authorship, right? The problem is, like, what you're doing right now is you claim, yeah, stylometry can find textual differences and can do author profiling. Yeah, sure. Even if I grant you that, was the same model applied in all studies? No. That's basic common sense, right? So you can't say, well, yeah, stylometry was applied in this particular publication, therefore this other publication is also reliable. That's not how it works. If a particular model was reliable, then you have to apply that very same model on the data that you have presented to come to the same conclusion. The general reproduction by any
Ilyas,
other model.
let
1
me
minute,
just
let me
make one.
finish.
Let me just make one request. Let me just make one request, and
Let
then I'll let you
Ilyas
speak.
finish, Muhammad. Let Ilyas
Let me
finish.
just
Go,
make
go
one.
ahead, go ahead.
Let me just make one request. Look, this debate would be more productive if we just spoke for 1 or 2 minutes each, rather than going on 5-10 minutes tirade. I won't interrupt you again in this, but Just try to focus on a specific
Basically,
point
Muhammad Ilyas
so
is
that I
saying
can
that you
respond.
haven't demonstrated the question that he's
Yeah,
asking.
no, I'm the thing is when I give you time, you say the very same thing once again, but you don't provide us any evidence, right? You need to provide us evidence for a single authorship stylometric analysis of Hadith corpus. That's it. That's all we are asking for. If you think there are models that test for single authorship, mashallah, no problem, show us a study where that particular model is applied to the hadith cluster. Right now all I'm seeing is this: there is one cluster that is Quran, there's another cluster that is hadith. The hadith cluster has a higher variability within itself, right? And the hadith cluster is there. That's all I know. You need to show to me how does this cluster, which has internal variability, how does it come from one single source? And your claim about Rivaya Bilmana, absolutely false, man. It's a very simple. Go open, like this doesn't even need, like this is so clear. Just open any book, any hadith, collate all the asanid, look at the matan is different. Uh, for a fact, all the longer ahadith that you have, like in Bukhari, all the longer text that you have in Bukhari, all of every single one of them is a riwayah bil mana. This is not even questioned. We can go through every single one. Like it might take days. I can show you every single one is riwayah bil mana, unless it's a very short hadith like innamal a'malu bin niyat, like the first hadith. Yeah, that's not riwayah bil mana. That's riwayah bil lafz. Apart from that, like all the longer hadiths, any tell me any random hadith of Bukhari that's like 400-500 words, it's riwayah bil mana. There's going to be different recensions of it. Like that's not even a question. Like everybody knows this. Majority of Sahih Bukhari is riwayah bil mana. It's not riwayah bil lafz.
Okay, I'll respond to both these points. Firstly, I'll give you a simple proof that I'm not saying the same thing again and again, that Ilyas is wrong about this. I did not make, I think in the second last or the one before that, I made the point about the clusters and how he's interpreting them. And he never said I misinterpreted his point on that particular point, but he was saying this before. Because I wasn't misrepresenting him, because I'm not saying the same thing over and over again. This claim is false of his, firstly. Secondly, with regards to authorship clusters, right? He's saying that these studies don't analyze single authorship or don't test for single authorship or multiple. This claim is false. Again, the peer-reviewed study is literally saying the peer-reviewed study that is published in international conferences and checked by multiple peer reviews, that is saying these are one author. This is not the personal opinion of the author. This is what is saying in peer-reviewed literature. This is the problem with this claim. These studies specifically tested for single authorship as well or multiple authorship as well. Here's a point to remember. When you test for single authorship, you have to test for multiple authorship at the same time. This is something he's not realizing. Here, and I'll give a simple reason for this. Suppose you are taking a particular test, a particular book, right? Some book that's in front of you right now. You are testing whether it has single author or multiple authors, right? Now you run an analysis of it. Either it shows either that analysis will show it has one author, or it will show it has multiple authors, right? These are two logical possibilities in this regard. Unless every time you test that book, either it will show multiple authors or single authorship. You have to test both these things at the same time. You cannot test one thing without the other, because in that case you would be just assuming it has single authorship. This claim of his is so nonsensical, it's actually pathetic. But now I'll move on to other points regarding these studies. He's saying that there needs to be a specific model that tests for single authorship and that I am not providing that. Here's a simple question for you. I'll give you two scenarios. Which of these is more reliable? Suppose you run one method of testing, right, on one particular book, and it gives one result. And then you run the same method of testing on 10 other books, and then it gives similar result, right? Just one method is being used. Is that a more reliable conclusion? Or in the second scenario, you run 10 or 20 different types of statistical, numerical, or linguistic analysis. All those 20 methods of linguistic analysis are giving the same result. This scenario would be much more reliable because you have multiple independent methods giving the same result over and over again. That's why we would be sure that this test has one author. This is what is happening with the stylometric studies on Quran and on Hadith. All of these studies using different methods are showing specifically that these Hadiths have one author. There's simply no way around this. Uh, One more thing in this regard, this appealing to multiple lines of evidence is done in all facets of science. For instance, why do we know a Big Bang is true? Because there are multiple lines of evidence supporting it. Why do atheists argue for evolution? They claim there are multiple lines of evidence supporting this. Now, in terms of stylometry, I am bringing numerous stylometric analysis, numerous different models. They are basically showing the same thing again and again. They have that these studies, that these hadiths have one author. Why wouldn't you trust it? I mean, this is literally how science works. So I think his claim in this regard is nonsensical. Now, just to address two other points, now I'll address the point regarding riwayat bil mana and verbatim transmission. He said that the very long hadiths in Sahih Bukhari are not transmitted verbatim, and they are transmitted bil mana. I agree. I agree that very long hadiths in Bukhari, or that hadiths that have 100 words, 200 words, 300 words, they are transmitted bil mana. They are not verbatim. But are most hadiths in Bukhari like this? Most hadiths, in my experience that I have seen, are relatively short hadiths, 3, 4, 5 sentences. For instance, I'll just give you a short story. I woke up. I had breakfast. I went to the market. I bought some clothes. I came home. I had dinner. I slept. This is a 2 or 3 line story, right? Most hadiths in Bukhari or in general are of this length. They are not of hundreds. They don't have 100 words, much less 400 or 500 words. So he's making a false comparison here. And if he claims that more than half of Bukhari is bil mana, I want evidence of this. Moreover, one more thing. Here's what he cannot do. He cannot say just this hadith in Bukhari is different from this hadith in Muslim. Therefore, both of them are transmitted bil mana. This is a fallacy, because it could be the case the hadith in Bukhari is transmitted verbatim, and the hadith in Muslim had some words words changed. For instance, the word for day being different, or etc. Something like this. So his claim is literally garbage. Now, why would he said that we won't move on until I concede this claim? Why would I concede this claim? My claim is mentioned in peer-reviewed papers, the peer-reviewed international conferences who are saying the same thing I am. They are testing for intercluster relationships. They are literally testing Quran and Hadith and whether they have one author or not. Now, I'll point out one of his dishonesties and then I'll let him speak. He said that there are massive differences between Hadiths themselves. Here is the table 10 from the first study I read. I'll just read you the 4 clusters that are mentioned there of Quran, 4 segments of Quran and 4 segments of Hadith, and I want you to analyze the differences. Hadith segments 30.85, 31.16, 30.66, 28.87. These are 4 segments of Hadith with their differences. Now we will look at the Quran segments. 20.01, 19.73, 19.38, 18.99. Like, they are very similar minor differences between Quran and Hadith. So he's lying about this again and again. Here's a simple point, and after this Ilyas can respond, because to be honest, I won't be able to stay here all day, because it seems that's what Ilyas wants, but I'll just make one point in this regard. He's trying to challenge the conclusion from the study I'm making. This study is peer reviewed. It's mentioning in there are numerous studies like this. They are mentioning the same thing again and again. These hadiths have one author. This is in peer reviewed paper. This is not just a personal opinion of the author. The claim he's making that there are massive differences between Quran and Hadith, I just used the same table he was using for his analysis, and the difference between Quran and Hadith are not that much. They are slightly more. The Hadith one has slightly more differences in the Quran, but it's really not that much. Like, I mean, his claim is, look, this is not something controversial. This is literally in the plain paper of the text. Moreover, here's the most important factor in this. The Orientalists themselves, they came up with a criteria for why stylometry should work and should not work. Their criteria was that stylometry should be able to differentiate between authentic and fabricated hadith. There are multiple independent studies from different authors in this. One of them is from a university in Algeria, another is from a university in UK. They are saying the same thing, that stylometry can distinguish between authentic and fabricated hadith. This is how stupid his claim is. He's trying to use like certain terms from the paper to sound sophisticated, but his claim is nonsensical, and frankly, some of the nonsense he's spewing, not even the Orientalists will repeat. Now, Ilyas, you can respond and maybe move on to one of your arguments, because after that I have to go, and we can schedule a second debate if you like.
Yeah, my question still remains unanswered. I have asked you, you're keep on repeating the same thing. I have asked you a very simple thing. We already agree that the two clusters are different from each other. We already agree the paper that you yourself cited shows that there is inter-hadith, intra-cluster variability. Even if you look at the second publication, the visualized publication that you have cited, the intra-hadith variability is like present there. Like actually one of the hadiths is at 0.8 feature Z, and it's pretty close, pretty not close to other hadith clusters, right? Even if you see at the citation that you cited yourself, right? And even if you look at figure 1, there is from H1 to H04, there is a great variability that you can observe, right? So the argument, the evidence is pretty simple. You show us a model that was particularly tested for detecting differences within the clusters, right? It's like a Behnam and Sadeghi, like the Sadeghi one, where he has a model and he cites a lot of models that try to find differences within the cluster, right? When you know that there is internal variability within the hadith clusters, the evidence has to be pretty simple. It needs to be a model that has been tested for analysis within a text. It's very simple. So what should the model do when you give it a single text? It's which is known to be written by a single author. It should say yes, it is written by a single author. When you give it multiple texts that are written by multiple authors, it tells you yes, these are multiple authors, right? And they need to be from the same genre. That's the problem that we are facing right now. The models that you are citing, they are making a logical jump. They are differentiating between generic clusters, and then from there they are saying this is single authorship. That's not how it works. For you to make an argument about single authorship, you need to have a consistent model that has predictive power over the same genre, right? So for example, you give it tafsir, like all the genres that we know for a fact that have different authorship. Then only then, when you know about the reliability of this model, only then can it tell us something reliable about the single authorship of hadith. Even when you talked about Bukhari and Muslim, even the shorter ahadith of Bukhari, even 5-6 sentences once, they have internal variation, right? There are other recensions, other turuq of the hadith that are going to have either verb differences, smaller differences, because this is taking into account even wa, right? Even the usage of wow. So that's the kind of analysis that this paper was trying to do. So in Bukhari, well, even 5 sentence ahadith, they are going to have internal recensions that are distinct, right? So how can you even apply stylometric analysis to the hadith corpus? And keep in mind, this was just on Bukhari. Even the data that you're citing, even if we take at the best, this was just at Bukhari. This was not in on the whole hadith corpus. uh, there are multiple recensions within the hadith corpus that clearly show that even the shorter ahadith are riwaya bil ma'na. So, bro, I have been asking you for the same thing. You need to show us an evidence of intra cluster analysis, and you are not showing this. That's the main problem. I mean, we can go on and on about this, but that's what you need to show. You need to show intra-cluster analysis, and based on a model that has that is highly accurate in intra-cluster analysis, not inter-cluster analysis. We already agree on intra-cluster analysis.
Okay, I'll respond to this point. I have opened the 2015 study from Halim Saud that he was citing, right? Look at the page 5 cluster. There are 6 pages here. Look at the fifth page cluster. It's on Quran and Hadith. In this cluster, all the Quran text segments are pretty close. Most of the Hadith segments are extremely close. One of the Hadith segments is further from the others. You can look at this. This table and this image is actually proof that his claim is false. These studies themselves are carrying out intra-cluster analysis. They are analyzing the Hadith cluster and they are analyzing the Quran cluster. How do we know this? If they were
Yes,
not, Ilyas,
brother,
let me
no,
finish this
no.
point. Ilyas, let me finish this
you
point because
you
I
you
let you go on for a
why
long
do you
time.
keep, yeah, why do you keep on misrepresenting my claim? Where did I say
You
there
change
is
your claim
no?
every 2 seconds.
No.
Yes, you
See,
do.
if you don't understand the claim,
Ilyas, you
just
change your
ask me
claim
once again.
every two
Okay,
seconds.
go ahead. Okay, go ahead. I'll interrupt you when you're done.
Actually, I think I have asked multiple times when I did not understand something Ilyas was saying. Like, anyone can watch the recording of the debate. I literally did this. He was saying earlier there was no intra-cluster analysis. The Hadith cluster is not analyzed. If the Hadith cluster and the Quran clusters were not analyzed themselves, then they should be the same here. They shouldn't show any some differences. But these studies are clearly analyzing the Hadith cluster and the Quran cluster because the Quran cluster is different from the Hadith cluster. In fact, and here's the problem. So that claim is refuted. Now Ilyas is saying there were massive differences in between the Hadith cluster. They are not. With one exception, all of the segments are pretty close. Yes, there is one segment further, maybe just a hypothetical guess that one cluster is further because that text segment is of Hadith that were transmitted bil mana, that they were not transmitted bil verbatim. That's just one cluster, so that's why nine, I think it's nine, yeah, yes, nine of the Hadith plus text segments are extremely similar and linguistically close, and one of them is further. It could be the case, and it seems a rational explanation because nine of these were uh, were transmitted verbatim, and one of these were transmitted bil mana mostly. So, like, his claim doesn't hold water here. He's saying, why aren't there any specific studies which analyze hadith just themselves? Intercluster textual analysis of hadith. There are two problems with this claim. One, all of these numerous stylometric studies I mentioned, they are doing intercluster analysis. They are analyzing hadith themselves. Secondly, the study that I mentioned that was done on authentic and fabricated hadith, that was literally doing that. It was just analyzing the hadiths themselves. I gave two studies regarding authentic and fabricated hadiths that literally analyzed hadiths themselves. So that claim doesn't even hold water anymore. Now, one last point in this regard, and I've addressed this before. I'll just address it again for clarification in this regard. He's saying we need to have specific models that are trained to detect single authorship or multiple authorship. Right? This is something he has repeated again and again, and all of you can agree with me that he said this. Here is the problem with this claim. All of the models that are used, all of these in these stylometric studies, they are peer-reviewed models that have been used again and again for analysis on single texts and on multiple texts. Like, this happens all the time. He's claiming these are not, that I need to give some special evidence for this, but I don't. For instance, let's take a field of study such as physics. Someone publishes a paper in physics that they mention something pretty common that's done in physics, and I'm supposedly using that paper for evidence. Do I need to prove every single of the methods? No. The burden of proof would be on Ilyas in this regard because he's saying something unusual, out of the ordinary here. That these peer-reviewed scholars who are publishing their paper in international conferences are using data, are using studies that they haven't even tested. This is literally the claim he's making. And why would the burden of proof on me would be on me in this regard? It would be on him. Just regarding the specific point regarding whether these professors, these scholars have not tested the things they are using. Like, that claim on face is nonsensical unless you have good reason to think so. So I wouldn't take that seriously. As for his point regarding hadith not being tested, again, look at these papers. He's saying that we agree that there is intercluster analysis done on these studies, and that there's mentioned in these studies, and that Quran and Hadith are extremely different. This is proven from these studies. But the same studies, the one that he's agreeing with, they mention that intra-cluster analysis or the analysis of Hadith themselves was carried out as well. These papers are literally saying this. And they are also saying, these peer-reviewed papers are also saying these Hadiths have one author. So he's agreeing with one thing from the same from these papers, and he's disagreeing with another thing, and he's pretending that I'm making up the other thing out of thin air. Well, that when that particular thing is used in authorship analysis again and again, as and it is present in these mainstream peer-reviewed papers. That is the problem with this claim. I'm not saying something new or out of the ordinary here. I am saying the same thing that these peer-reviewed papers are saying, and that he is agreeing with. This is the problem with this claim. Now, with regards to Bilmana, he said that even the smaller hadiths have differences, right? I addressed this point earlier, I'll address it again. Suppose the smaller hadiths have some differences. There is one hadith, for instance, a hadith with a minor difference wording in Bukhari and in Muslim. That wouldn't refute my argument at all, for a very simple reason. This analysis was only done in Bukhari. The hadiths in Bukhari are the one that are showing to have one author, one verbatim source. And again, he said that most of the Bukhari is like more than 50% at least. He was saying that it's Bilmana. Prove that claim. Literally prove that claim. I have everything that I have mentioned in this debate so far, I've bothered to give peer-reviewed references for. All he's doing is here is giving his personal opinions and feelings on this topic. He's coming up with a random criteria out of thin air and pretending that's evidence. It's not. Lastly, one thing I would like to mention. I made a very simple point earlier that our particular model cannot test for single authorship at once. It has to test for single authorship and multiple authorship at the same time. I gave a simple argument for this. He never addressed it. Moreover, I gave a simple argument for why numerous different statistical analysis showing that hadiths have one author is evidence for hadith reliability. This is exactly what's done in science all the time. He never addressed this. Why do we believe in the Big Bang? Because there are numerous lines of evidence independently showing that there was a Big Bang. Why do atheists argue for evolution? Because they will claim there are numerous different lines of evidence. There aren't actually, but they will claim there are numerous different lines of evidence arguing for or demonstrating evolution. This is how science is literally done. You look at multiple lines of evidence, and if they line up, then that's evidence. In this case, in the case of stylometric studies, we have 10 or 20 different stylometric tests that are done on these hadiths. All of them, the models that have been tested again and again for single and multiple authorship, and they are all showing that the hadiths have one author. Now, I think we are stuck on this point, and to be honest, I don't see the point of argue this again and again. You can have the last word, Ilyas, if you want, because I believe I've said everything I wanted to say. Just try to have a short one, because then I'll leave, and after this debate is done, I'll upload this recording on my YouTube channel, right, like we agreed.
Yes. So as you can see, even after multiple inquiries, Muhammad has failed to produce evidence for intratextual analysis, intracluster analysis, right? Yeah, there is partial cluster analysis, intracluster analysis in the studies. Nobody has disagreed with that. Rather, I've used that as an example of outliers that even in the citation that he's citing, even in the paper he's citing, there is variability within the clusters, and Hadith cluster has a higher variability. What I asked him in particular, which is absolutely fair and rational, is an analysis on within the cluster using a model that is trained within the genre, right? Because it's very simple. You don't want confounding factors, right? So you need a particular model that accounts for the differences within genre, that accounts for the differences within the conventions, and then it applies that adjusts for all these variables, and then it applies an analysis on the data and comes up with conclusions, right? And the way to test such a model would be to feed it data from a single source, from a source where you already know the authorship is one, right? For example, Tafsir al-Tabari or something like that, where you know the authorship is one, or Tafsir Muqatil bin Sulaiman, something like that, and then use that and see how accurate the model is within the genre, when it is accounting for the features within the genre, when it is accounting for conventions within the genre, and then see if it is able to distinguish between single authors and multiple authors. And the way to do that would be give it a single author textual blocks and give it multiple author textual blocks, and see how reliably can it distinguish between single author textual blocks and multiple author textual blocks, and then apply this model. Once you know it has been shown that the model is reliable, then apply this model on hadith and see whether it shows multiple authors or a single author. The model that is being applied in these studies does not fulfill such a criteria, and we have I have asked for such a model, such a citation multiple times, but has not been provided with one. Then the reason this stylometric analysis, even on a simpler level, would not work is because the stylistic features of hadith are not prophetic. We know that for a fact. Why? Because just based on the matan has high variability with regards to the wording, with regards to the way it is written, with regards to the syntactic structure, and with regards to the particular recension, right? And this is well known. Even very short ahadith, even like 4 or 5 sentence ahadith, they show internal variability. And all you need to do to know that is just look at various recensions of the same hadith, and you will see that they have differences in different recensions, i.e., a particular tradent would have its own particular recension with peculiar features, and another tradent would have other features based on its
Uh,
peculiar recension. So for a fact,
I
we
just
know
have
that
to
the
go.
content in.
I'm not
Okay, no
trying to
problem.
interrupt you. I have to go. But
Okay.
yeah, it was a nice debate. At least we didn't interrupt each other too much. So at least I enjoyed that. I'll upload the recording of the debate till this particular point, right from the start to this point on my YouTube channel. And I think there are a lot of topics with regard to Hadith we didn't get to cover. So if you want a second debate, maybe I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Jazakallah.
bye.
Bye. So yeah, so this is the problem. There was an absolute lack of evidence in this debate from the other side, from the interlocutor, and honestly, they were not even understanding the claim that I was basically making, right? So the reason this stylometric analysis would fail, even on just on conceptual grounds, would be because we know for a fact that Bukhari does not preserve the prophetic recension verbatim, because there is no prophetic recension to begin with. Even if you are being very generous to traditional hadith scholarship, very generous, even then the prophetic recension is not recorded verbatim. Rather, the recension of particular traders is recorded, which in itself has internal variability. So for a fact, we know that these stylistic features are not originating from a single source, right? So even if the stylometric analysis shows that these are originating from a single source, we will say that the stylometric analysis is wrong. It was unable to understand the differences within particular recensions, because we have much stronger evidence to show that the stylistic features are effect of particular tradents, not some underlying prophetic recension that was carried on verbatim by people, right? Just on face value, this claim is false. So yeah, I think this was a pretty simple conclusion. I don't think this stylometric analysis in any significant way whatsoever leads to the conclusion that the Sunni Hadith corpus is reliable. And the point about peer reviewed studies is obviously, man, it's very simple. The people who are peer reviewing stuff on Hadith and Quran, they are only going to look at the technological feature when it is being published in a technology journal or something like that. They're not going to analyze for Hadith and Quran, like the technicalities of the matter in the way that we are doing so. So that's not even a significant point. Yeah. So Ahmed, if you want to say something, and unless inshallah we'll close the room.
Yeah, I think he made two jumps which he couldn't justify. One was that, okay, he said that the style of Quran and Hadith, they're different. That therefore, okay, we agree to that. I think you even told him twice that no one disputes that the style of Arabic and sentences in the Quran and the Hadith, there is a difference between them. This is something that's well established, even amongst the academics. So that's not disputed. And then from that, he made the claim that because they differ, therefore the Hadith can be attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That doesn't follow. And like you said, because there's these Hadith. He brought the paper, which I had to read. These slides that he presented, that's pinned on top of this room. This doesn't show anything. There's no evidence that shows that these hadith can be attributed to the Prophet, even for argument's sake. Even if it can be shown that these hadith have a similar style, how does that then establish? Because multiple these in Bukhari, for example, it doesn't establish that then this can be attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam 200 years prior, because there were forgeries. So and these forgeries come from 4 or 5 common narrators. So there was a lot of jumps that he did and without any justification. So that's what I saw.